This is the Mop-Up. I'm David Feldman. Thank you so much for finding me in New York City. It never stops. That's how authoritarians work their magic. It's a blitzkrieg of never-ending news cycles designed to confuse and wear you down. As I always say, don't pay attention to anything Trump says. Pay attention to what he does. And don't listen to what he says about what he does. Pay attention to what reliable sources say he has done. And Trump did something. So here is the latest on absolute resolve, Donald Trump's land invasion of Venezuela. As of early Sunday morning, the New York Times is reporting that 40 Venezuelans, soldiers and civilians, were killed by the United States military in their attack on Venezuela, which resulted in the capture of that country's president, Nicolas Maduro. The entire operation reportedly took under 2.5 hours. No American service members were killed. One U.S. aircraft was reportedly hit, an attack helicopter, but it was able to fly out of danger. 150 aircraft flying out of 20 U.S. air bases in the Western Hemisphere attacked 4 Venezuelan states, the states of Caracas, Miranda, La Guera, and Aragua. Power outages were reported throughout the country as the pre-dawn raid began. The U.S. military targeted two air bases, one Fuerte Tiuna and the other one La Carlota. And then they captured the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife, Celia, as they attempted to run into their presidential palace's safe room. At 1:01 a.m. Eastern, the United States military's extraction force dropped from helicopters to meet with other soldiers already on the ground. They broke into the palace to grab the couple. It was an operation the military reportedly practiced for at least 3 months. Maduro was flown immediately to the USS Iwo Jima, where he was photographed. I believe they have photographs of him in handcuffs, although that may be AI. And Donald Trump declared, "We are going to run Venezuela." Maduro was flown to Gitmo in Cuba and then on to New York City, where he and 3 others, including his wife, were charged with trafficking thousands of tons of cocaine into the United States. Other charges include conspiracy to engage in narco-terrorism and possession of a machine gun. DEA agents made a public display of Maduro being perp-walked through the DEA headquarters in Manhattan. Maduro greeted reporters by saying good night and Happy New Year. He is currently being held in the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, New York. That's where Diddy and Ghislaine Maxwell were also held. Donald Trump declared early Saturday morning in a 1-hour speech that, quote, "We're going to run the country." But the Associated Press reporting later that day, there is no evidence that American troops have seized control or assumed the role of a ruling authority. Pete Hegseth, Trump's defense chief, appearing on Barry Weiss's CBS News. Pete Hegseth said the United States is in charge, but they will leave it up to Venezuelans to sort out their situation. According to the New York Times, Trump refused to say whether American soldiers will serve as an occupying force, but he told reporters he's not afraid of, quote, putting boots on the ground. The invasion is not just in defiance of international law, but runs contrary to what the American people want. The Economist conducted a poll late last year finding that just 15% of Americans see the situation with Venezuela to be a national emergency. Most Americans don't approve of this invasion because there is no situation with Venezuela. Politico reporting that Virginia Senator Tim Kaine, Democrat, will force a vote next week on whether Congress is willing to authorize this war. According to the Constitution, war-making powers belong to Congress and only Congress. The president is the commander-in-chief. So in order to launch an invasion of another country, the president needs either a declaration of war or a war authorization. Before leaving for their Christmas holiday, the House on December 17th voted against a resolution that would have barred Trump from launching either an airstrike or any military incursion inside Venezuela. That bill was introduced by New York House Democrat Gregory Meeks and was defeated by a very narrow margin of just 216 to 210, 6 votes. Gregory Meeks now accusing Secretary of State Marco Rubio of lying to Congress. Meeks told the Washington Post yesterday, quote, Rubio said there was not any intention to invade Venezuela. He absolutely lied to Congress, unquote. New York Senator Andy Kim also making the same charge against Secretary of State Marco Rubio, as well as Defense Chief Pete Hegseth, seen here with some of his neo-Nazi tattoos. Hegseth also told Congress in December there were no plans to invade Venezuela. This is a picture from the Mar-a-Lago Situation Room as the attack unfolded. There's Trump, then you see Rubio, and there's our CIA director, John Ratcliffe, and there's Pete Hegseth, hunched over his laptop, frantically trying to get Jeffrey Goldberg from Atlantic Magazine into a Signal group chat that includes real-time updates on attack coordinates. According to the War Powers Act, a president can't send troops into a country unilaterally without permission from Congress. But after 60 days, in rare exceptions after 90 days, the president will need a war authorization from Congress. Otherwise, the troops must be removed. A president cannot veto Congress's failure to give him a war authorization since there's nothing to veto. So after 60 days, sometimes 90, you get an extra 30 if that's what it's going to take to remove the troops. If the president doesn't have a war authorization, the troops must leave. Trump's White House and some Republicans in Congress said the airstrikes in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific that started back in September, they say those airstrikes didn't need a war authorization since they didn't involve the deployment of troops, and at no time were American troops in any danger. But that interpretation of the War Powers Act is subject to debate. It's about war, not whether or not our soldiers are deployed or are in danger. The New York Times out with a timeline of events leading up to the invasion, showing Trump's buildup in the Caribbean of military assets began in August of 2025. Everyone thought it was just posturing. Pete Hegseth, Marco Rubio, told Congress that sending the world's largest aircraft carrier down there was just a show of force, that there would be no invasion. By September, the airstrikes on suspected Venezuelan drug dealers in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific began. Venezuela doesn't border the Eastern Pacific, but we were shooting up supposed Venezuelan narco-terrorists in the Eastern Pacific. According to the New York Times, at least 115 of these so-called narco-terrorists were killed in about 135 separate airstrikes that we know of. And then, in late December, Trump let slip that the CIA had conducted drone strikes on a Venezuelan port, a land attack. And by the end of 2025, there was a complete air and naval blockade in and around Venezuela. So Hegseth is right when he told Barry Weiss's CBS News that Trump is a man of action. He kept saying that during his interview on Barry Weiss's CBS News, that Donald Trump is a man of action. But action doesn't mean you did something good. In June, Trump phoned in airstrikes over Iran, then declared victory, but Iran still won't let in the UN inspectors, and now there's talk of more airstrikes on Iran. In March, Trump declared victory over the Houthis in Yemen. He killed hundreds of civilians, but the Houthis are still firing missiles into Israel and the Red Sea. Yeah, he's a man of action. Trump peacocked on Saturday, much like he did back in June when he bombed Iran. Trump said the next target will probably be Cuba, he said, quote, I think Cuba is going to be something we end up talking about because Cuba is a failing nation right now. Invading Cuba. You know, Trump might want to check with Dr. Bobby Kennedy Jr. about how invading Cuba worked out for his Uncle Jack. You're looking at a 100% authentic artificial intelligence photograph of Bobby Kennedy Jr. performing a tummy tuck. Tummy tuck, I believe, is what the White House calls an abortion. Dr. Bobby Kennedy Jr. Yes, he should make all your health care decisions. Trump then said he was authorized to invade Venezuela and Cuba thanks to the Monroe Doctrine, which claims America's right to intervene in any South American country that it sees fit. Trump bragged that no president has used the Monroe Doctrine the way he has. He said, quote, we superseded the Monroe Doctrine by a lot, by a real lot. He knows good words. He added that they are starting to call it the Donroe Doctrine. By them, he means him, calling it the Donroe Doctrine. Most of us are just calling it World War Trump. Because it's Trump and we have absolutely no idea what is fiction and what is a lie, we just have to listen to other people. Because sometimes fiction comes out of Donald Trump's mouth and sometimes it's a lie. For example, Trump claimed on Saturday that the vice president of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, is now in charge. And he praised her, saying she has signaled a willingness to do what he wants. He says, we're going to get to make Venezuela great again, and she's on board. But the vice president of Venezuela told reporters there is only one president in this country, and his name is Nicolas Maduro. No, she's not cooperating with our lying president. Rodriguez, early after Saturday's invasion, demanded proof that Maduro and his wife were still alive. Maduro's wife was apprehended along with her husband, and she also faces charges of narco-terrorism, conspiracy to engage in narco-terrorism. And that's tricky. When husbands and wives conspire to commit acts of narco-terrorism, it's been known to put a strain on the relationship. What happens often is the couples no longer recognize where the line is between husband and wife and co-conspirators in narco-terrorism. That's why you have to turn off the phone, put away all the electronic devices, and connect with each other emotionally. I call it mutual self-care. Otherwise, it's tough. Rodriguez, vice president of Venezuela, then accused Trump of invading her country for the sole purpose of seizing Venezuela's oil reserves, which I've been telling you since September. Venezuela has the largest known oil reserves in the world, bigger than Saudi Arabia's. Maduro's predecessor, Hugo Chavez, nationalized Venezuela's oil industry in 2007. How dare he think that their oil belongs to them? ConocoPhillips says they are owed several $billions because of the nationalization of the oil, and Exxon is owed close to $1 billion as well. Trump refused to say whether American troops will occupy Venezuela, but he made it clear that our oil companies would. He said our American oil companies will go in, spend billions to fix the infrastructure, and it's going to start making money again. In Venezuela, right now, citizens pay, you ready for this? 2 cents a gallon for their first 32 gallons of gas each month. After their first 32 gallons each month, the price of a gallon of gas in Venezuela skyrockets to 13 cents a gallon. Damn socialists. So what do you think a gallon of gas is going to run next week in Venezuela, now that the oil companies are back in charge? Supposedly, we don't know how this plays out. Trump said American oil companies will go in, they'll start drilling, and he said they're going to take a lot of oil from Venezuela so we can make a lot of money in order to take care of Venezuela. We are going to make a lot of money. So who's we? The multinational oil companies, according to Trump, are going to seize the oil. So we, I presume he means the United States, will then take care of Venezuela. So Exxon and ConocoPhillips will make billions off the oil, and that money will be used by us to take care of the people of Venezuela. He said Jesus. Well, what do you expect from a man who insists the American consumer doesn't pay for the tariffs? He said, we have the greatest oil companies in the world, and we're going to be very much involved in it. Okay, we don't have the greatest oil companies in the world. The oil companies have the greatest leaders in the world. I don't know if they're the greatest, but they have most of the leaders in the world willing to spend billions of taxpayer dollars protecting those oil company profits, especially when an upstart nation like Venezuela, which has the world's largest known oil reserves, has the audacity to believe it belongs to Venezuela. According to the Washington Post, in 2024, Trump told a group of oil executives that they should donate $1 billion to his campaign, calling it the best investment the oil industry would ever make. Well, the oil and gas sector only donated about $100 million last year directly to Trump's presidential campaign, but it's estimated they spent $500 million that year on getting Republicans elected. New York House Democrat Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez responded to news of Saturday's invasion of Venezuela by saying, it's about oil. She said that Trump wants regime change to install an oil-friendly leader, and his accusations that Maduro is a drug dealer are just a pretense. She said Maduro's drug trafficking trial in New York City is just to create the illusion that this invasion isn't about oil. Well, yeah, it now seems pretty obvious Trump was never interested in anything other than taking the oil. You might remember Mexico offered to mediate negotiations between Maduro and Trump. But Trump refused because there was nothing to negotiate other than give me your oil. He did speak on the phone occasionally with Maduro last year, but only giving ultimatums. Then in December, Trump ordered a blockade on specifically oil tankers off the coast of Venezuela. Oil couldn't come in or go out. Why? He wanted it. Then again, Mexico said, hey, let us mediate. There doesn't have to be a war. Let's sit down, you and Maduro talk. Trump said there's nothing to negotiate. And then everything became clear. You might remember our military took a Venezuelan oil tanker that was sailing off Venezuela's coast, and then our country seized another oil tanker. Trump was asked, what happens to that oil that we seized? He said, we keep it. I guess. That's what he said. We keep it. You guess. You know. As the military built up in the Caribbean, prepared for this invasion, Trump was open about it. He said the threat of war will escalate until Venezuela returns the oil they stole from us. From us. They stole oil from us. We're talking about a country that nationalized their oil and cut into the profits of multinational oil conglomerates. They're not us. Exxon isn't us. ConocoPhillips isn't us. Multinational mining and oil companies have a problem with Venezuela, not us. Nobody stole oil from us. So this was going on all last month in December. And each time America seized a Venezuelan oil tanker, Gustavo Petro, president of Colombia, he's the one who accused the Pentagon of killing innocent Colombian fishermen, not innocent Venezuelan fishermen. He's been pretty open about this. The president of Colombia called the seizures of Venezuelan oil tankers a gross violation of international law. And Trump responded last month by telling the Colombian president, "You're next." And then on Saturday, when the president of Colombia, Petro, criticized the American invasion of Venezuela, Trump told reporters that Petro better watch his ass because he's next. See, this administration loves talking tough. Pete Hegseth on Saturday said of Maduro, quote, "He effed around and he found out." Sounds good, doesn't it? Remember George W. Bush told the Iraqi soldiers who bled into the community, the elite Republican Guard that was fighting back, he said, "Bring it on." So they love to talk tough because in the moment, it sounds good. If you have a commander-in-chief, a general, a defense secretary, a president talking tough, it means he doesn't know what he's doing. There's no plan. They have no plan. Talking tough means this invasion was for two things: the oil and politics. Nothing to do with drugs, other than whatever Pete Hegseth might be on. So here's the question. Is it about drugs? What do you think? Or politics? Or oil? JD Vance basically saying, why can't it be all three? Well, is it about politics? Sure. Because you'll notice JD Vance was down at Mar-a-Lago for the New Year's bash, but he wasn't out front making the big announcement about the big bash on Venezuela. No photos of JD Vance in the Situation Room. So yeah, it was about politics. Where's JD Vance? No photos of him making the announcement. No photos of JD Vance in the Situation Room looking presidential. What happened? JD just got endorsed by Erica Kirk and Turning Point for 2028. She announced they are spending millions on Iowa for him. So no JD Vance in the Situation Room. No JD up front making the big announcement. Here's Trump announcing the bombing campaign over Iran back in June. You see, there's Hegseth, Rubio, and prominently displayed Vice President JD Vance. He's in on it. But then Erica Kirk endorsed JD for president. No JD in the Situation Room or making the big announcement about Venezuela. Not a threat. See, that's when he's not a threat to Trump. That's when he is a threat to Trump. Donald Trump's running for a third term. The Constitution says he can't. Constitution also said he couldn't invade Venezuela without permission from Congress. He's running for a third term. The New York Times reporting J.D. Vance, loyal foot soldier, said Venezuela's drug trafficking must stop. So he's perpetuating the lie that this is about drugs. But then he said the stolen oil must be returned to the United States. It doesn't belong to the United States, and it doesn't belong to Exxon or ConocoPhillips, but this was done for multinational oil companies, not for the United States. Return the oil. It used to be, bring back the hostages. Now they don't even bother. They just say, return the oil. But like tie a yellow some ribbon around the old gas station. I don't have anything. I had something. maybe the flu. Okay. We're doing this for the oil companies. We're doing it for the oil, but the oil companies, they're going to thank us. They're going to thank you, the American taxpayer, and of course, the soldiers for putting everything on the line, engaging in this invasion. They're going to thank us. What they always do whenever we fight a war for oil, they cut the cost of gas in half, especially during the winter months when right now people are going broke trying to heat their homes, right? That's what's going to happen. No, the price of oil is going to go up. Monday, you're going to shock to the oil world. People are going to panic and start panic buying oil. Price of oil somehow is going to go up. It always is. Let me show you what you're in for on this little invasion here. Can you see this? Okay, hang on. What am I doing here? Okay, this is what it costs. An F-35 fighter jet, $42,000 per flight hour. A B-52 bomber, $88,000 per flight hour. A B-1 bomber, $171,000 per flight hour. That's what it's costing you. I saw some of that a little cheaper at Costco, but it's pretty expensive. But our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, he says it's worth spending the money overthrowing a narco-terrorist state. It's not about oil. It's about stopping the flow of drugs. And Rubio points out that Nicolas Maduro, the former president of Venezuela, although the vice president of Venezuela says Maduro is still president, he was indicted by the Trump Justice Department on March 26, 2020, on charges including narco-terrorism, conspiracy, cocaine importation, conspiracy, and weapons-related offenses. So there was already a 5-year-old indictment and a bounty on Maduro's head, which Trump said he should collect. I'm sure he will. JD Vance accusing Maduro of leading a narco-terrorist state. He said, quote, "You don't get to avoid justice for drug trafficking just because you live in Caracas. No, you first have to be pardoned by Donald Trump. Remember Juan Orlando Hernandez? He's the former president of Honduras. Trump gave him a full pardon on December 1st of last year. Hernandez, former president of Honduras, ran a narco-terrorist state. He was convicted in 2024 for dealing over 400 tons of cocaine, or as Don Jr. calls that, Tuesday. He was found guilty, literally, of running a narco state. Venezuela is not a narco state. Honduras is a narco state. So 1 month before invading a fake narco state, Donald Trump pardons the guy who ran a real narco state. Why? Because it's supposed to be hypocritical. That is the authoritarian playbook. Confusion, chaos, up is down, down is up. Trump, a convicted felon, calls himself America's chief law enforcer. That's how it's in the playbook. Read Jason Stanley. Read the books about fascism. Trump knows what he's doing. He has studied what you do to create so much chaos. You become the only one who can create stability. So, do you believe this is about drugs? The DEA, in last year's annual drug threat assessment, that would be the drug threat assessment for 2025, the DEA said Venezuela is only a minor player in drug trafficking. The DEA said the two biggest drug cartels are Sinaloa and the Jalisco, both located in Mexico. And it is generally believed not believed, known that Venezuela only serves as a hub for cocaine distribution, but not for the cocaine coming to America, for the cocaine going to Europe. The cocaine doesn't get manufactured in Venezuela, and they have nothing to do with fentanyl. Nothing. Even Laura Loomer, now you know who Laura Loomer is. She's the QAnon conspiracist who has Trump's ear, and she's gotten plenty of White House staffers fired this year because they don't pass her Trump loyalty test. And she, Laura Loomer, is now a credentialed Pentagon reporter. She has the desk in the Pentagon occupied by the Washington Post. I'm not making this up. She has the Washington Post desk that the Post gave up to protest Defense Chief Pete Hegseth's demand that all reporters covering the Pentagon have to take what amounts to a loyalty oath. You have to promise only to report the official version of events. You're not allowed to talk. If you want to cover the Pentagon inside, you want press credentials, you have to promise not to talk to any Pentagon personnel, even on deep background or off the record, without first getting prior written authorization from Pete Hegseth. So Laura Loomer took the loyalty oath, and she's now a reporter from the Pentagon. She's doing it for Real America News. Even she criticized the airstrikes on suspected narco-terrorists that took place in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific, that are taking place. She worked off the DEA's annual report from last year, and she said, what we know, fentanyl, she said, isn't manufactured at all in Venezuela. And she said cocaine isn't manufactured there. And she said, this is what she said, and it's pretty brilliant. She said Pete Hegseth knows where the real drug lords are. They're in Mexico. He knows where they live, where their compounds are. She said, why is Pete Hegseth going after suspected dealers in tiny boats when he could just bomb the compounds of these drug dealers? Excellent question, Laura. You might remember Pete Hegseth is accused of telling Admiral Frank Bradley to kill them all when an airstrike on suspected drug dealers in the Caribbean left survivors clinging to the wreckage for 45 minutes. And they didn't know what to do. And the Washington Post reported that Pete Hegseth said, kill them all. That would be the infamous double tap that was ordered, the double tap. And the survivors were killed in direct violation of American and international law. Video shown to members of Congress reveals the survivors waving at the drone, signaling for help before the drone killed them. Hegseth adamantly denies accusations that he gave the order to kill them all, but then adds, I would have given that order, but I didn't. So let's see. He likes to talk tough, right? Fafo, F around and find out. He likes to talk tough. Maduro effed around and found out. Okay, Mr. Tough Guy. The order, you say, was the right thing to do. You would have given it, but you didn't. If it's the right thing to do, Mr. Tough Guy, and you're Secretary of Defense, why not take credit for it? He says, I didn't give that order, but it's the right thing to do, and I would have given that order, but I didn't give the order. House Democrat Jim Himes represents, I think it's, Connecticut. He is the ranking member on the House Intelligence Committee, and he saw video from the second strike on the survivors. This is what he said. They're not making this public, but this is what he said. What I saw in that room was one of the most troubling things I've seen in my time in public service. You have two individuals in clear distress without any means of locomotion with a destroyed vessel. They were killed by the United States. It's a war crime. It's a war crime. But Pete Hegseth says, I didn't give that order, but it was the right thing to do. But I didn't give it. Who did? Well, Admiral Frank Bradley is taking the fall, we think. He says, I ordered the second strike. He says, I ordered the double tap. It sounds so anodyne, doesn't it? The double tap. We didn't violate international law by killing survivors. It was just a double tap. Right, and the killing of JFK was sinus-related. He wasn't shot in the head. It was sinus issues. On December 5th of last year, Admiral Bradley testified behind closed doors about the double tap. And he said he was given intelligence that the boat they fired on was carrying drugs. Well, that doesn't justify a double tap. But then he was asked, okay, it was carrying drugs, you had intelligence. Where was that boat that was carrying drugs heading? What part of the United States was the boat heading to? Texas, California, Louisiana, Florida, Suriname. Now, if you're wondering, I know Americans are bad at geography, what part of the United States is Suriname? It's 2 doors down from Venezuela. Suriname is between Guyana and French Guiana. The boat, the victims of the double tap, was heading away from the United States, not towards the United States. Suriname is not part of the United States. It's to the south of Venezuela. But Mike Johnson, our Speaker of the House, he heard the Admiral's testimony. He called the double tap part of protecting our homeland from narco-terrorists. And our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, defended that attack, saying we were just targeting a terrorist organization. Well, were the survivors of the double tap, or the victims of the double tap, were they part of a terrorist organization? Were they fishermen? Were they drug dealers? Well, the rules of engagement demand you don't kill the survivors. That way you can find out. You don't kill them all unless you don't want anybody to find out. You know, Mr. President, if you're watching, I'm no expert on any of this, but it seems to me, instead of invading Venezuela to stop the flow of cocaine and fentanyl into our country, wouldn't it just be a whole lot cheaper to send Don Jr. to rehab? I get it. You love your son. You're a concerned father. But sending Don Jr. to rehab is a lot cheaper. Actually, it's not. Ever since Mitt Romney's Bain Capital, that's the private equity firm that he used to run, is still part of it, Bain Capital is buying up drug treatment centers. So it's very expensive in America to kick drugs. It might be easier, instead of, if you're so concerned about drug addiction in America, I don't know, free treatment on demand might be cheaper than invading Venezuela, but this isn't about drugs, is it? Well, they got him. They got him. They got Nicolas Maduro. And the Associated Press now reporting superseding indictments have been handed down on top of the ones from 2020, accusing both Maduro and his wife of conspiring to run a narco-terrorism ring. So it's interesting what's going on here, calling drug dealers narco-terrorists. Before Trump, drug cartels were not labeled terrorists. By officially labeling drug cartels terrorists, and that's done by Marco Rubio, Secretary of State. If the Secretary of State labels drug dealers terrorists, then drug dealers are no longer subject to the DEA. It's no longer an issue for the Coast Guard or the DEA or Interpol or the police. If they are terrorists, well, now it's a military issue. The military deals with terrorists. The DEA deals with drug dealers. Coast Guard deals with drug dealers. The military deals with terrorists. So when Marco Rubio labeled drug dealers terrorists, the military steps in. And why is that? Well, that way Trump can invoke the war authorization passed by Congress in the immediate aftermath of 9/11. It was passed to combat international terrorism. And because of that war authorization, which has been renewed, it's still in effect, Trump thinks he can label anyone a terrorist. And once he does that, it automatically gives him authority to use our military to attack whoever he labels a terrorist. The Secretary of State has to officially label somebody a terrorist. So it's a stretch. It's not legitimate. And it's exactly what everyone warned would happen if we kept renewing the war authorization to fight a global war on terror. Some of you remember this when that was passed right after 9/11. There were cooler heads, and they warned, let's go after the people who attacked us. We don't need a war authorization to fight a war against terror, because terror isn't a country. It's not even an ideology. It's an amorphous word that can be applied to anything or anyone, like a 2-year-old child or a drug cartel. You can call a 2-year-old child a terror, and you can call a drug cartel a terror. That was the authorization to justify the invasion of Afghanistan. That authorization still in effect. And it's what George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden, and Trump again, cite whenever they want to launch a missile strike or send in troops without having to go hat in hand before Congress asking for permission the way our founding fathers intended. Also indicted on January 3rd, after Maduro was apprehended, Maduro's wife, Celia Flores, was indicted, and their son, Nicolas Ernesto Maduro Guerra. So they've indicted Maduro, his wife, and their son, Nicolas Ernesto. So now our government is going after the mom and pop narco-terrorists. That's what we're doing. The Jalisco and Sinaloa cartels in Mexico, they get bigger and bigger as our government puts the mom and pop narco-terrorists out of business. It's so hard these days to run a small mom and pop narco-terrorism ring. According to the New York Times, prosecutors in this new indictment, they say that Maduro entered Venezuelan politics and he tarnished every public office and official he ever had contact with. Sounds like somebody Trump would like. Legal scholars are questioning whether Maduro can even be tried in the United States because of the Pentagon's operation. His arrest was a violation of international law. It was an extrajudicial arrest. So will it hold up in court? The Fourth Amendment forbids illegal search and seizures. We all know if the cops kick open your door and they don't have a warrant, well, it used to be this way up until last year. Even if they find something, if they don't have A warrant, the Fourth Amendment dictates, doesn't matter if you had drugs, they didn't have a warrant, they throw the case out. That's the Fourth Amendment that forbids illegal search and seizures. Remember KSM? He's also known as Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, and he is believed to be the mastermind of 9/11. He was captured on March 1st, 2003. So they caught him. I'm going to get to Venezuela. I'm making a point here. So they caught the supposed mastermind of 9/11, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. They caught him on March 1st, 2003. Well, I'm going to guess that he would have been caught in Afghanistan, right? Because we invaded Afghanistan. Why? They were behind 9/11. See, they weren't, though. The Taliban had absolutely nothing to do with 9/11. Might be something worth considering since, we spent 20 years in Afghanistan. How many lives lost? You'd think Americans might know where Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind of 9/11, was captured. Wasn't Afghanistan, and it certainly wasn't Iraq. It was Pakistan. It was caught in Pakistan. The CIA, working with Pakistan's intelligence service, tracked Khalid Sheikh Mohammed down in March of 2003. Pakistan, and they didn't really have to track him down. Pakistan knew where he was. A lot of Al-Qaeda in the Pakistani military at the time of 9/11. Well, what about Osama bin Laden, right? He was caught in 2011. Well, was he caught in Iraq? Was he caught in Afghanistan? No. Pakistan. Abbottabad. Pakistan. But that's another war based on a lie that I've been over countless times with you. Iraq and Afghanistan had nothing to do with 9/11. Nothing. But how many hundreds and hundreds of thousands of lives lost? Our military coming home? Soldiers destroyed? How many trillions did we spend to fight two countries that had nothing to do with 9/11? I bring this up because do you think for 1 second Donald Trump is worried right now that people might find out he's lying about Nicolas Maduro? You think he loses a second of sleep worrying that, God, if Americans find out that I lied our way into a war, they're going to do absolutely nothing. They're going to do absolutely nothing. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed has been in U.S. custody since 2003. And we've been trying to put him on trial. We're coming up on 23 years. What, the Nuremberg trials, didn't they start am I wrong? Didn't they start right after the war, like in 45? I think the trials started in 46, I think. But they began in 45. Discovery began in 45. 23 years, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind of the worst attack on United States soil. 23 years. No trial. Can't do it. Why? CIA tortured him. He got waterboarded 180 times. So his confessions don't hold up in court because it turns out when you're getting waterboarded and you think your lungs are filling up with fluid, you'll admit to anything. There are some people who believe he was waterboarded so there would be no trial, that they didn't want a trial. the same reason all flights were grounded on 9/11 except for the ones carrying members of the bin Laden family. Everybody couldn't fly after 9/11 except members of the bin Laden family. So you think maybe they waterboarded KSM so there would be no trial? No, because Dick Cheney and George Bush weren't that smart to do that. So Maduro, will he get a trial? I don't know. By then we're going to forget this. We forgot the guy who ran Panama, who actually did end up doing time in the United States. Noriega. Bush, and I'm going to get to Noriega in a second. George Herbert Walker Bush, I think it was his first year as president, invaded Panama. I'll get to that in a second. And Noriega was captured. He was accused of drug dealing. And George Herbert Walker Bush knew for a fact he was a drug dealer because they were doing it together with the CIA. But enough about the hearings that John Kerry held. Where am I? Let me just give you I got to wrap it up. Chuck Schumer says the idea that Trump plans to now run Venezuela should strike fear in the hearts of all Americans. But House Speaker Mike Johnson says of the attack, it was a decisive and justified operation that will protect American lives. You would think maybe the speaker would be a little concerned about war powers being taken away from his House of Representatives. Pete Buttigieg said an unpopular president decides to launch a war for regime change abroad. Ruben Gallego, senator from Arizona, freshman, served in Iraq, says this is the second unjustified war in my lifetime, Democrat. And my mayor, Zohran Mamdani, said unilaterally attacking a sovereign nation is an act of war. Mitch McConnell said the president had broad constitutional authority for the limited use of military force. And yeah, when it comes to war, the Republicans are getting in line. The Congressional Black Caucus came out against Trump's invasion. And the world, Latin America, Lula said Trump crossed an unacceptable line. President of Colombia, Petro, calls for immediate UN emergency session. Mexico, Sheinbaum, the president, condemned the intervention. And I don't know how to pronounce Argentina's president's name. Milei, he says, I think we're giving him $20 billion to bail out his economy. He called it freedom. This is a picture from the Associated Press. These are Venezuelans who are refugees living in Argentina. They're celebrating the defeat of Maduro. And in South Florida, there were pictures that the Miami Herald published of Venezuelans in South Florida separating Maduro's capture. How's it pronounced? Safeway, he's gone. In Doral, Florida, Venezuelans were shouting, he's gone. In Washington, D.C., no blood for oil. Guterres, the head of the UN, said Trump has created a dangerous precedent. I don't think it's a precedent. He said, I'm deeply alarmed by U.S. military action, and we'll wrap it up. Is there anything? Yeah, okay. Let me wrap up about the politics of this. So the New York Times has an article that says this reminds them of Manuel Noriega, 1989, when George Herbert Walker Bush invaded. Now, he was successfully tried, Noriega. He did time for cocaine. Then he went to France and did time, and he died in the past 5 years back, I think he was under house arrest in Panama when he died. Here's what Trump is probably thinking about the politics of this. George Herbert Walker Bush invaded Panama, and he was testing the military to see if he could, use them properly. And Panama was a splendid little war. That's what Teddy Roosevelt called the Spanish-American War, a splendid little war. You get the jingoism gets going, and you get a bump in your poll numbers. It'll be interesting to see the poll numbers for Trump. He's now at the lowest he's been of his presidency. Now, conventional wisdom has always been when we go to war, everybody rallies around the flag and they rally around the president. After we were attacked on 9/11, George W. Bush became the most popular president in American history. How did he become the most popular president in American history? By ignoring intelligence reports that said Osama bin Laden intent on flying jet airliners into the World Trade Center. The towers come down, our Pentagon gets flown into. George W. Bush, this idiot, becomes the most popular president in American history. So it'll be interesting to see if Trump gets a poll, because he's at the bottom now. Here's the thing that happened to George Herbert Walker Bush, if you want to compare it to Panama. He got a bump in the polls after Panama, and then he invaded Iraq, Saddam Hussein. Remember that? That was the first Gulf War. Saddam invaded Kuwait in 90. We, America, went in 91. And George Herbert Walker Bush became the most popular president in American history after Iraq. He said, Vietnam syndrome, we can win wars again. And we had parades, and we were back. And George Herbert Walker Bush in 91, nobody was going to run against him in 92. So all the good Democrats, the smart, we're going to sit this one out. He's the most popular president ever. Bill Clinton said, I think I'm going to do this. A year and a half later, George Herbert Walker Bush got kicked to the curb the same way Winston Churchill got kicked to the curb. I don't even think World War II was over when the British kicked Winston Churchill to the curb and replaced him with Clement Attlee, Labor. So we'll see. Trump's running for a third term. I'm curious to see if Americans have wised up when it comes to false patriotism, jingoism, and hiding behind the troops. Read David Swanson's book, War is a Lie. You cannot go to war, says David Swanson, unless you lie. All war is a lie. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Thank you for listening to me. Go to Down with Tyranny. Read Howie Klein. I can't yet talk about Howie Klein quite yet, but I will when I'm ready. But he did my show every Monday for 15 years. So anyway, go to Down with Tyranny and read Howie Klein. I love you, Howie Klein. Thank you to Bob and Mila in the chat room for keeping the conversation civil. Please share this episode with your neighbors and your friends and your loved ones. What else? Subscribe to this channel, hit the notification bell. Some of you are not getting notifications. It's because this show is considered political, so you have to do something with your settings to get the notifications. Some of you, there's a default setting that says we're not going to send you anything that's political in terms of advertising. You have to choose. So that's why some of you aren't getting the notifications. Subscribe to my channel, subscribe to my newsletter, please. Yeah, if you're feeling overwhelmed, that's the plan. That's the plan. That's what it's. You think the good news is that there'll be something on Monday. We're going to forget about Venezuela. He's going to create something else. So you got to pay attention to what he's doing, not what he's saying, and then hold him accountable for what he's doing. Because he's, like I said earlier, with Trump, you don't know what is fiction and what is a lie. Thank you for listening. Leave a comment. I read all your, as you know, I read all your comments. Thank you.